All right, I can't even say it's getting to crunch time. It is crunch time in a lot of leagues. Playoffs are either already here or maybe a week away. And so if you're in a head-to-head league and you're battling either to make the postseason or secure your standing, or you just want to go in on a high note, you got to figure out what to do with these stars who are just not hacking it. I mean, are you really going to sit a guy who was one of the MVPs of the first half? You might need to think about it. But first, before I get to the Cubs, let's talk about one of the most surprising rookie stars here. Not surprising that Jacob Misiorowski is a really good player, just surprising, well, that he made the All-Star team after starting just like a handful of games. That was surprising. But also the fact that he was as dominant as he was. Look, I'll be honest, I was shocked even that he was in the rotation as early as he was. I thought they were going to be really careful with this kid and they were going to put him maybe in the bullpen, basically like what the Pirates are doing to Bubba Chandler, which doesn't make sense on the other hand because they should have put him in the rotation back when the Brewers did what they did. But anyways, logic doesn't always rule the day for these clubs. So the Miz was great, right? Like league winner, right? Outstanding, rookie of the year. And then he got hurt. All right, this is exactly what we're afraid of. Guy who throws super hard, has a long history of injuries. Since he's come back, we have not been that excited because 2 starts off of the IL, it has been pretty rough. First game, 1 1/3 innings he lasted, and he allowed 5 earned runs at Cincinnati. Followed that up with 4 innings, giving up 3 runs at the Cubs. Better, but the problem is in both those games, the control has been a little bit off. 3 walks in each of them. Before that, he had only walked 3 or more batters in 2 games the whole season. He is still generating whiffs. The velocity is still there. He seems to be healthy. Then this is where we also have to step back and remember, besides the fact, oh, he's coming off the IL, is this is a rookie, right? This is a guy who was really performing way better than he should have coming straight off the minors. And maybe this is also just some of the league figuring him out, some regression, et cetera, et cetera. So can we trust the Miz down the stretch in your fantasy playoffs? I hate to say it depends, but it really depends. How deep is your staff? How valuable is he to your squad? I hope he isn't one of your very top starters. If so, I'm not sure how long you're going to last in the playoffs, anyways. Look, I would much rather just wait and see what happens his next start. He really wasn't bad in terms of stuff his last 2 starts. The wildness, that's not unusual. He had shown some wildness beforehand. Again, it was really more shocking that he had been so in control as he was when he first got called up. So I'm just going to say I'd rather keep him on the bench. I'm not dropping him unless it's like an 8-team league. If you're in a shallow league, sure, you should have much better options already. But I'd rather just stash and deploy as needed. And man, if this next start is a bounce back start, then okay, you're glad that you kept him at least. All right, now let's get to the big topic here. And it's been a topic for weeks. This is nothing new. I could do a whole video just on the Cubs and their offensive struggles and the rise and fall of this offense, but let's just stick to a couple of players at a time here. I already addressed Kyle Tucker last week. Let's just get in front of this PCA. I know it's like you can't even think about benching a guy who, like I said, was basically the best player in all of fantasy other than Aaron Judge the first couple of months of the season, right? The speed, the power, everything. What happened? Crow-Armstrong just coming off another 0 for 4 game. Yeah, his second half, even before Sunday, was not good. 226, 3 homers, and 10 RBIs. A far cry from what we saw in the first half of the season. The problem that wasn't a problem early is now definitely coming to problem. It's the splits. He's only hitting 190 against left-handed pitchers, and the K rate in August is spiking, and it's not just a matter of one pitch or another. It's against every pitch type, but I'll say that if you look in particular off-speed stuff, although it's not the pitch type that gets him the most, it's the one that has been steadily increasing in terms of the whiff rate the most, but he's just striking out more in general. One thing I've noticed why his batted ball outcomes have been worse, Crow-Armstrong hitting the ball on the ground a lot more. That ground ball rate continues to climb. And look, I know he's fast, but still, if you put the ball on the ground enough, it's going to lead to ground outs most of the time, right? He was hitting the ball in the air a pretty good amount of time and pulling it and he was yanking it out of the yard. This is where we saw that unexpected power surge. He has power, but he is not a power hitter. And so that home run rate we saw in the first half, it was unsustainable, and it's not going to keep up if you keep putting the ball on the ground. But honestly, this is closer to what you would expect from a guy like this because, again, nobody thought this kid was going to come in and be the MVP this year. The power numbers were really just kind of almost out of nowhere. Look, long story short, this is natural regression. This is kind of what we should have expected. I know it's hard in the moment to think, how could Pete Crow-Armstrong not continue to be the best player in the National League? Look, he's talented. He's got all the tools, but he's not a guy who's going to hit over 300. He is more like a 250s hitter, right? And so things are evening out. That said, are you putting him on the bench the rest of the season? Is the slide going to continue? I don't think you can do that because he still is giving you runs and RBIs. He still can steal bases. And even if the power isn't going to nearly be what it was in the first half, he's still got some pop. And I think that he'll get a little bit better in terms of maybe some of that positive regression evening out. At least I hope so. And he's not the only Cubs outfielder who is having the struggle. Now, I also already talked about Ian Happ before. Last week, I basically said you can cut him. I don't feel that way about Seiya Suzuki. In fact, quite the opposite. Now, Suzuki, another guy who was like the rest of the Cubs offense, just absolutely on fire early in the season. And it's been a steady drop. And in fact, we've seen it specifically with the power numbers with him, 1 month after the other, the slow decline. And it's very obvious if you see that slugging rate just plummeting almost. And look at the numbers by month. Talk about homers, in April, 6, then in May, 7, June, 8, July, 4. In August, just 1. You want to look at extra base hits altogether, doubles, triples, homers, 12, 19, 10, 10, 3. But somehow, even though the slugging numbers are dropping and continuing to drop, the rolling xwOBA is getting higher. In fact, he's underperforming on his batting average. His xwOBA is still solid. His expected batting average, 264. It's about 20 points higher than his actual batting average. And look, all the numbers really across the board are really, really good. He's got an xwOBA for the season in the 85th percentile. His barrel rate's in the 98th percentile. I feel like we're due for some positive regression along with all the other Cubs, but Suzuki's a guy I'm going to usually just keep in my lineup, and I feel like there's a big surge coming. All right, and this one might pain you too. Let's talk Mike Trout. Mike Trout, is he done? I mean, look, we're going for 400 home runs here, right? This is what's in the news. He's going for that milestone. It must be weighing on him. Either that or this is just, a guy who kind of late in the dog days of the season for the same team he's always been with that's not a contender, just not completely with it. He just went 0 for 4 again. And yeah, he's close to that milestone in terms of home runs, not making it happen. He's only got 1 homer in the entire month of August. This has got to be weighing on him. I don't know what else it could possibly be because honestly, his numbers in terms of power aren't that bad, at least his metrics. Despite being a little bit older, look, the bat speed is still solid in the 78th percentile. And in fact, his launch angle sweet spot percentage is the very best in the majors at the 100th percentile. The odd thing here, though, is despite, guy who's got so many injuries and physical issues, this does not seem to be something physical with him. He hasn't been on the island forever. You think, look, if you could tell me Mike Trout's basically going to stay healthy almost the entire season, that he's not going to put together a great statistical season, and yet he's not. And that's because it's not physically that I think, he's not the same player that he used to be. It's, well, I guess let's say, I don't say mentally, but the reaction time isn't the same. His strikeout rate has skyrocketed to 30%. He still walks a lot. He's been very patient. He's taken a lot of pitches. He doesn't chase a lot. He's getting on base. But come on, unless you're in a points league, if you're in your typical roto category leagues, the walks aren't doing it for you. We need home runs. We need extra base hits. We need something more here. And that strikeout rate is still high, which, again, it's kind of at odds with what we're seeing here as far as not chasing and taking a lot of pitches. But you know what? He's just not pulling through when it counts. I'm benching Trout until this changes because at this point, he's just hurting you, and the batting average really isn't helping you. And like I've said all season long, he's not stealing bases anymore for you. He's just not an elite fantasy player. He's a power-dependent player who right now is not hitting for power, much less anything. And then a veteran pitcher that, like, I didn't put on the cut list, but I guess I might as well have. We're worried about Seth Lugo? You should be. Since the All-Star break, only one quality start. That's because in 4 of the last 5 starts, he hasn't even lasted 5 innings, much less 6. On the season, it still looks pretty solid, but his Sierra is a 4.46 and his expected ERA much worse at a 5.18. It's the thing I just talked about with PCA, that negative regression. It was bound to come, and it's coming. And Lugo never been a high strikeout pitcher, a 20% K rate, and a whiff rate that's in the 17th percentile. Now, Lugo is one of those veteran pitchers that's always been able to kind of outperform his expected stats and, kind of get away with not having great stuff, but only to a certain extent. And look, this is a lot like last year's Royal, Brady Singer, who kind of had a breakout season only to plummet back to earth the next season. Lugo's been around longer. Lugo has done this before. Back when he was with the Mets, had some good seasons. Last year was really good, but let's face it, he is not a top line pitcher. He doesn't have great stuff, and it's catching up to him right now. I did mention in my bold predictions for the second half, I thought this Royal staff could struggle, and Lugo is definitely struggling. I don't think you need him the rest of the way. All right, hopefully that helps you make some smart decisions for the rest of the way this fantasy season. And don't forget about waiver wire pickups. Had a lot of good ones this past week. If you missed that video, check it out here.